Joined now at the Boston Public Library for the next hour by Boston's Mayor Michelle Wu. The mayor's here for the next hour taking our questions, your calls, and if you're with us in the audience of the library, you can ask her a question yourself. Just find one of our colleagues. Nicole is right there. Hello, Nicole. You can walk over to her, and maybe even, and Shay, I think, is working with her too, wherever Shay is, but she's somewhere here, and ask a question directly to the mayor. Mayor Wu, it's good to see you.
Nice to be back.
Yeah, thank you very much.
It's so luxurious. It's all upgrade. I feel like I need to bring a bunch of papers and spread them all out also.
That's right.
It only took us about 5 years to get that, too. It's amazing how quickly we worked.
We were criticized for having people being too low, and we were too high. So we decided to raise everybody up.
Maybe it was.
Sit in the squishy chair.
That's right.
What is this, if I may ask?
So these are treats from a bakery. Oh, no. Tell me the bakery. Caramello on Blue Hill Ave. They are along the route for this weekend's Open Streets program. So
great.
There's a tres leches and a flan for you to. Okay,
dibs.
I think we know what she's getting.
Favorite. That is the best thing
I love flans,
in the world.
that's perfect.
Thank you very much. Oh my God.
What's the name of the place again? One more time.
Thank you very much.
Caramello. So the idea is that the streets will be shut down to vehicle traffic, and you can scooter, walk, dance, check out all the small businesses, many of them who will be spilling out onto the street as well. It's a fun time, and this weekend is Blue Hill Ave.
And Newberry remains a Sunday event,
That's
correct?
Right.
Every
Yep.
Sunday.
Okay. That is really good. I just had a bite, so it's one of my favorite desserts of all time. Okay. So before we get to the, nitty-gritty of city government here, this is a great story I thought about. I saw it on Boston.com. Our staff gave it to us that New England has two of the best summer outdoor movie events in America, and one of them is right here in Boston. And I was embarrassed to say, I knew they did movies a while ago down at the Boston Harbor Hotel, but is that what they're talking about it, or is it something different?
It's rotating all around the city, actually. Our Parks Department not only keeps the grass beautiful and maintains the playgrounds, but they actually put a lot of effort to creating programming in our treasured public spaces as well. So starting in August, we will have 2 months of free movie nights rotating around the city. They're kind of, they're more family movies, Spider-Man, and this and that, and all different movies, all different locations. So you can check the city's website, and thanks to the incredible folks at the Parks Department for keeping that going.
That is a neat thing. That is something you will remember. I remember watching movies outside when I was a little kid in the backyard. It was like a big thrill. You remember it your whole life. That's neat.
So to the serious business, not that that's not serious business, entertaining people and keeping them outside. A story broke yesterday. Wu administration says the Globe will offer tax breaks to turn office buildings into housing. A day after a wonderful story by our colleague Shirley Leung about what happened in the Wall Street area in New York City. It used to be abandoned from 5 p.m. and weekends, and it's now this bustling thing. Could you briefly describe for people who didn't follow the news in the last 24 hours, what are you proposing and what do you think the prospects for this are?
The idea is that, if you ask any person off the street or kid to draw a picture of a city, they might draw those skyscrapers, big buildings, a downtown area where businesses are, but more and more, that's not necessarily sustainable for cities in a receding pandemic economy where people are zooming in for work. Many of those office buildings are more and more empty. We need every part of the city, including downtown, to be a thriving residential sector. And having people, foot traffic, for safety, for the small businesses to thrive is really important. So what New York saw success with was converting some of the office buildings to residential. It's a cumbersome process, and often the newest office buildings might not be totally appropriate because you don't necessarily have a lot of windows in the interior space and the plumbing's not quite right. But some of the older buildings in Boston, for example, that do currently have office space downtown might be appropriate. So even just a small number of these Class B, Class C older buildings with floor plates that are more susceptible to working for a residential layout, if we can help them with tax incentives, just get that conversion going, one building could potentially create hundreds of new housing units that could include a lot of affordable units, green requirements, and so we're designing a program that will launch this fall to encourage those property owners or developers to think about it and think if we can partner on making that happen.
Do you have a goal in terms of number of conversions you're hoping for and what kind of time frame?
So I really want to just set expectations because every developer I've spoken to can immediately name the top 10 reasons why this is very, very hard. And in some ways, unfortunately, to make the finances work, the tremendous cost to redo all the plumbing and all of that, the property value of the commercial building has to have sunk pretty low, that they're getting desperate of how this could function. And so this is almost a mechanism where we can both save and rescue some buildings that are on the verge of falling off the tax rolls permanently because of changes in the economy, and reinfusing residential. So even if we got 2 or 3 buildings downtown with a couple hundred units each, that would be a significant step to revitalizing and getting people.
And a couple more details, and then we'll move on. Affordability requirements are built into this,
Yeah,
right? Okay.
you know, so when I was on the council, I had proposed a whole set of considerations for tax breaks, and those were derived from best practices nationally, where every time you are trading off the ability to collect taxes later on, even if it's necessary to make something work now that's very important for everyone, you are giving up public resources, and that trade-off has to be a very intense calculation. And so at the very minimum, as we're requiring the new conversion to satisfy our 20% affordable requirements, satisfy climate efficiency requirements, we would also include clawback provisions so that if anything along the way doesn't end up aligning with the expectations, then that tax deal, the kind of incentive program, reverts back to how it was before.
And I assume there's a zoning component, without getting lost in the weeds, that you're confident is going to happen, or no?
Yeah, I mean, many of we're in the process of working through a planned downtown process that has lasted many years at this point. And as we begin to think through the changes of what a downtown means in any city, opening it up so that these conversions from office to residential in our downtowns, but also, you know, if you think about neighborhood Main Streets corridors, there might be some buildings that used to house law offices on the 2nd or 3rd floor that actually we want to make it easier for them to convert as well. Every little bit helps in our housing crisis.
One last thing about this, and by the way, I should have given the number a few times. It's 877-301-8970 if you want to call the mayor, if you want to text the mayor, 877-301-8970. And I don't know why we asked this question, but maybe this discussion is being had before you made your announcement. Last month when the governor was here, we asked her about whether she'd support such an effort downtown. And she said something like, everything should be on the table. Is there an active discussion with the state about them making a contribution to make this more likely to happen in a serious way?
Yeah, I think at this point, the goal is really to say, let's get out of the general idea and down to, if we can identify 1 building, 2 buildings that can be the template, then we really get into the nitty-gritty of what does the financing look like, how much would it actually cost to convert, do we need to move elevators, is it about just installing more windows, and then layering the financing is something that we can pull on state and hopefully federal resources as well.
Has she pretty much said to you that there'll be money there? We want to work with you on this?
The governor and lieutenant governor have been incredible. I mean, they are right there with us
Okay.
on our efforts to convert to housing, to add more housing and make it affordable.
So one last thing before we get to the text and the calls, and the number again, 877-301-8970. Last time you were here, we've talked to you actually a lot about home rule, the idea that you have to go up to the legislature to get things done in Boston, like a rent stabilization program. Jim,
I
of
know.
course,
I feel like I should have brought that and printed it so I could ask you about it.
well,
That was
Jim
great.
is too humble to talk about his brilliant piece in the Globe on Saturday, talking about home rule and rent stabilization and your efforts to get rent control, rent stabilization, whatever we want to call it, into Boston because of the terrible increases in rent. So I just wonder, is there any updates, if you heard anything more on this front?
I mean, I would ask Jim on this front if we've gotten egged or anything like that. On our front, it's been very positive to just get a wider recognition that many of the things that are most important to our residents, housing prices, wages, the ability to ban fossil fuels and move in that completely green direction. So much of this, at this moment, the way our government is structured here in Massachusetts uniquely, does require leaning on the state legislature. And they've been great partners, but they have their own set of issues that they're working through, finishing the budget and other statewide issues. And so we try to raise our hand and get that attention wherever we can. But there are many issues that in other cities they would be able to act on totally on their own that we have to be in close coordination with.
So you're essentially where you were last month. You haven't gotten a no. Is that a fair?
Yeah.
They're very busy right now finishing
Okay.
the budget, and so I will resume my gentle door knocking
Okay.
after that.
Let's go to Lorraine in Brighton. You're on with the mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu. Welcome, Lorraine. Thanks for the call.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor.
Good
I know
afternoon.
you're doing good. I hope you're also doing well. I live in what seems to be a forgotten section of Brighton. When I stand on my back steps, I see the Welcome to Brookline sign. So I'm really on the edge of Brookline. There are a lot of roads that switch back and forth between Brighton and Brookline. And it's almost as if Brighton thinks they belong to Brookline, Brookline thinks they belong to Boston, but nobody seems to be taking care of them. Many roads are in really tremendous disrepair. Potholes and cracks and just generally in bad shape. The Cleveland Circle terminus of the Sea Line, the parking there is in desperate need of restriping. Cars park all over the place.
Hey, Lorraine.
and-
Lorraine,
Yeah.
Lorraine, you're doing a wonderful job, but I assume the question at the end of the line is, what are you going to do about it? Is that where you're going?
Yes, that's exactly where I'm
let's
going.
find out.
Thanks for the help, Jeff. Yeah.
Thank
My
you, Lorraine.
pleasure,
I'm taking
Lorraine.
notes.
Thank
I'm getting my list so we can follow up on all of it. And if it's possible for Lorraine to stay on the line, just so we
Please.
can get her street as well, so we can take a look. But
Don't hang
this
up,
is-
Lorraine.
I'm in my element of being able to say, okay, let's figure out where we can attack some of these potholes. The parking restriping, if you're talking about the MBTA section, it might be a little complicated with T jurisdiction as well, but this is what we do, and even in the areas where it requires a little coordination from our fellow municipalities, we're very eager to reach out to them and make sure we can be on the same page. So we'll follow up.
Lorraine, don't go away. We'll take your contact information and give it to the mayor's office.
There's been a lot of talk about in the Boston public school system about receivership, and I know you don't like that idea. There was another editorial in the Globe and stories in the Globe about this blistering from the head of the Department of Elementary Education around here, Jeff Riley, saying that schools haven't kept up. In the context of that, we've gotten a couple of texts about the story. I'm sure you saw Deanna Pan. We had her on the radio with us, and the student that was the center of this.
Justice for-
the funding of
The Burke.
the Burke, which is really had almost next to nothing going on, versus Boston Lat, which seemed to have everything going on. So it's a two-part question, I guess. How worried are you about this chastising from Riley, and why did that happen with the Burke?
Yeah, so in terms of the relationship with the state and the, I wasn't at the meeting, but read some of the coverage of the comments. It's really unfortunate. And I may just show up at the next meeting myself to make sure that we can be on the same page, because the communication between the district, between Boston, BPS, and the state's staff has been ongoing, regular, very pleasant. We're making tremendous progress on just about every one of the items that are included in that, what's called the school improvement list, the SIP, the improvement plan. And I've always said from the beginning, that document is the very lowest of baselines for our district. Compliance with making sure that bathrooms are safe and clean and functional, and that our data is audited, and all the things that we have done. That doesn't make for a district that we are proud of. We are working to go so far above and beyond that. And so it's a little bit frustrating, because I know that the tenor of those conversations in our working relationship day to day at the staff level with the state has been very productive. And we are meeting the vast majority of those deadlines and metrics. The ones that the commissioner has chosen to elevate himself separately with a very different tone than the rest of his team, in fact, are not even accurate when it comes to how they've been conveyed, right? There's this hyper focus on on-time performance from buses, which I agree, as a parent and as someone who has experienced what it's like to put a child you're responsible for on a bus and then hear that they didn't get there for an extra 20 minutes and every day they have to miss math class, it is something that would cause you to think about trying to find another option. But when you look at the numbers and say, we need to hit 95% on-time rate, However, we are going to make you count as a 0 every bus that malfunctioned with its GPS that day, regardless of what time it actually got there, instead of just removing that data and not having it be counted and just use the good data. We are basically at 95% with the measurable data. But these other pieces where no other district around the country has to include dropped routes because of GPS technology malfunctions as a 0 in their system, it is meant, I believe, to create this sense of accountability and pressure. And I understand where, the commissioner has kids in the system as well. He wants to see Boston thrive and survive. We have a very different idea of what it means to work together and to have a productive relationship. And I think it's time that we get the chance at the city level to really show all of the metrics on that document. We will make our case. And then we are also moving so far ahead on some of the other issues that are not even covered by that in fact are what will make this district one that we're truly proud of.
So what do you think is going on? I have to say, to hear you say your description of where you stand and to hear Commissioner Riley's,
very different.
It's like they're talking about two different systems. What's the agenda, do you think, on Riley's part?
I mean, some of us have to run the system. Some of us have to show that they are watching over the system. And
But you don't think he's doing it fairly?
outside pressure is always helpful. I will never say that we want less accountability from any entity. I will say very forcefully that we are seeing our district more stable and making more progress now than we have in over a decade. I will firmly point to that in terms of retention of school leaders and teachers, the interest in staffing, to the number of applications we're receiving, the success that we're seeing with student engagement and many of these systems. We are dealing with many, many challenges that we've inherited over a long time, and some of that has been turnover in leadership, a very destabilizing situation where the superintendent was I believe the 6th in a 9-year period or something crazy like that. And so it's going to take a while. Many of our plans around reforming special education, which are tied to transportation and tied to quality and academic rigor or facilities, we have 3 to 5 year timelines to basically complete an arc that is going to get at the deep systemic issues. We want to see progress every single month, every single school year, absolutely. But there's a little bit of a disconnect, I believe, with how we are working together most of the time with the state and then what gets elevated.
But one last thing, if he's creating, these are in your words, but mine, based on what you're saying, a bit of a false narrative, does that not make your job harder with parents and teachers and everybody else?
I think some people don't care about that. And some people, they have to do their job in the way that they think they need to do their job. And we have to do that despite that. And frankly, I hear that from so many of the schools. I've visited the Burke many times. And when I hear from those students, there have been situations where I've been there just to talk with the young people and get their opinions. And then there have been situations where we were responding to something that was very unfortunate that happened there, for example. And in each of those instances, what I hear from our young people is we get talked about as if we are, not here and that we're not succeeding and nobody believes in us. They will say there's so much good happening in our schools. Our teachers are working hard every day. We are, in that case at the Burke, championship sports teams that are bringing the school community together statewide. And they deserve to have that full narrative and context presented. Of course we need to do better. I am not happy with the range of offerings that we give out at many of our schools. They need more. Every high school needs to have a full set of sports to choose from and academics and supports, and that's on us to create the resources so that it's not only the schools who can fundraise multiple $million-dollar foundations to be able to resource that.
I mean, that is the thing that the story pointed out, and I probably should have pointed that out too, that one of the things about Boston Latin is they have, and I saw this in Brookline where my kids went to school, you have very rich family members who can donate lots of things to the school and fundraise in a very effective way. So you might get much better computers or a much better art thing or whatever. That is going on at Boston Latin. It's not necessarily going on at other high schools, and that does make a big difference, I think.
Yes, it makes a big difference right now with the current setup, and so much of the additional support and resources that are able to be funded on the outside. We're grateful and eager for every school community to be able to contribute and volunteer however they can, but there needs to be a sense that the district will guarantee the basics that every child deserves, and that level of basics needs to be raised up.
One more school-related thing. We have somebody has a question about the teachers who's right there. Aaron is your name, I believe? Aaron, wearing a Boston Teachers Union Local 66 shirt. I just saw it. Welcome, Aaron.
Thank you, Jim. And Marjorie, I'm a big fan. I listen to your podcast every day.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much.
And Madam Mayor, so nice to see you and
Nice
to be
to
able to
see you.
ask this question. I've been teaching in the Boston Public Schools for a good 12 years now. My colleague in the audience, even longer than I. We have negotiations coming up for a new contract, a successor contract. And as you well know, the previous round was less than ideal in its slow pace. Boston Public Schools arguably engaged in bad faith bargaining. I don't believe any legal charges were filed, but many, many, many bargaining sessions were canceled on us. Calls not returned, foot dragging. It was incredibly frustrating. We ended up getting what I would say is a decent contract in the end, but it took so long. Almost the entire thing was retroactive.
So what's your
And
question,
now
Aaron?
we're at it again. And my question is, Mayor Wu, do you pledge to make the next round more efficient and more productive?
Aaron, thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. That has been, so yes, absolutely, that has been the goal, is that we should never have contracts lapse for our city workers. An active contract means that you are getting the regular cost of living increases to try to match, the pace of inflation and everything that's happening when workers, especially over covering this last period, which included the pandemic, people worked through that without any increases at all because the contracts were expired. I believe the BTU contract was a June 2020 expiration last time around, and so by the time we had, I could be wrong, but I think it was 2020 or 2021, so by the time that I came in to office, it had already been lapsed for a significant amount of time. I think you'll recall that when our administration started, all 48 some of the city's municipal bargaining units were expired. That has never happened before, ever. They're usually, just for the general public's knowledge, they're usually about 3-year contracts, and they're kind of rolling and on a, staggered, so that you're negotiating a batch of these every year on an ongoing basis. So we came in with a lot, and the teachers union is one of our largest, is the largest contract. And so along with public safety, you represent so many members. There are many issues that were related to the pandemic, especially in terms of working nonstop. So we had a lot of complexities to address there. And I want to thank you all, because where we ended up, I believe, is landmark. It was just groundbreaking in terms of the investments that we're able to make together now in reforming special education, in thinking about English language learners, in addressing many of the disparities around paid leave and other portions. You all came to the table not just demanding salary increases that you were owed, but really with a whole very, very long list of things that our young people needed. And that's what the entire contract negotiations were centered around. So we are still now almost done with getting up to speed from having no active contracts. We're just needing public safety to be the final ones for this first round, but we know we have to be back at it, and whatever we can do. We've also built out our staff a lot more since then in terms of the Office of Labor Relations, and hopefully it will be a different experience on all sides this time around, and you have my word that I will stay updated so I can jump in if needed.
By the way, we're going to get to the police contract later, but speaking of young people, is the deadline still in the future for summer jobs for kids?
Yes, this week is really, we want to make this the big push to remind young people, there can be some conversations if you really need to have more time to fill it out and then start late in the summer jobs program, but to be able to start on time with all your paperwork in, this is the week to get enrolled, finish all the processes and all that. There's some really great options out there. More than 7,000 roles that have been created across city departments, across private industry, and so we want everyone to sign up for that Success Link program. These are paid summer jobs. And if you know any young person who needs an opportunity, please tell them to
Where do
get
they go?
involved.
Where do they go?
City website.
City website.
Success Link.
Great.
You know, as long as you mentioned the police contract, I know we talked to you a lot about the needed police reform in Boston and your hope that you could avoid arbitration. I think that's what you said before. Now it seems like you're heading into arbitration. One of the things you talked about is changing the disciplinary system where officers who've been fired for pretty egregious conduct can get rehired, or when where officers get paid for working multiple police details at once. I mean, they're claiming to be due to 2 details at once, that kind of thing. Is this still possible? Because arbitration usually winds up helping the police and not the city.
Yeah, we are firmly in arbitration now, but have made some progress in terms of really narrowing the scope of which issues the department and the police union are kind of most interested in and most attached to. We are hoping that this will lead to a different outcome than usual, even through arbitration, because traditionally arbitration has just been used to decide between 2 different financial positions. Mm-hmm. The city wants to increase the salary by this much, the union wants to increase it by that much, and then there's some set of research and that the arbitrators do to decide to pick somewhere. There's actually, if you look at the legal language and all that, there's actually the ability to bring 5 separate issues that are not related to salaries into the conversation for arbitration as well. So our hope is to use all of those slots around overtime reform, around medical leave, around discipline and the role that arbitration plays in discipline for certain types of offenses, and to put that on the table as well, so that even some of the operational reforms that are needed, we will get into the same conversation.
You know, before we take a break, it seemed if I understand the process, and please correct me if I'm wrong, if ultimately the arbitration award is not what the city is happy with, the city council retains the ability to not approve the funding.
That's right.
Does the credibility of that position, assuming it comes to that, and I assume everybody hopes it doesn't, is the credibility damaged by the damage that some members of the city council have done to themselves, and maybe in turn, whether it's the whole, well, everybody knows what the issues have been of late, an ethics situation in one case, the driving situation with a suspended license, no registration in another. Does that not hurt the credibility of the body that may be the backstop on this pretty important issue?
I mean, to be honest, I think it hurts credibility on every issue. I will never hold myself up to be someone who is perfectly balancing everything that needs to be done and never making mistakes. I think in some ways we need our elected officials and those in office to really understand the full range of what our residents are going through. So I would never want to say that there needs to be a standard of perfection for behavior. At the same time, I hear from a lot of residents that there's great concern right now. It's just the kind of the density of, the frequency of different headlines that have been out there. And, all of us are on the ballot. That is the highest form of accountability for all elected officials. There's an election coming up in 2 months here in the city of Boston at the city level. But do I believe that our members, regardless of what's happening in the media and in other places, that they are tasked to eventually, hopefully, when this comes back, take a vote to assess the affordability of a package? That was the job before them, and that is the vote that they'll have to take.
We should just point out for people who don't know, Kendra Lara has apologized for allegedly driving on a revoked license, an uninsured, unregistered car, not putting a 7-year-old son in the back seat without a booster seat, and Councilor Ricardo Arroyo, paid $3,000 civil penalty for violating a conflict of interest law by representing his brother in a civil lawsuit involving a harassment case. So those
And
are the
continuing the representation after he was
Yeah,
elected.
so those are the two cases involved. Before we do go to the break, as long as we're talking about upsetting things, You, Mayor, seem to be particularly upset, I think, maybe I was reading things in that wasn't there, about this very tragic case in South Boston, the Mary Ellen McCormick housing development on the water there, that a trans woman was found dead in this apartment, and there were children in the apartment, and there were 51As filed by, I believe, both the firefighters and the cops. There seemed to be different versions of what happened, and you weighed in. So before we take the break, am I wrong? You seem to be pretty upset about the reporting on this story.
I think my main concern was, so just to review for some who might not have been following closely, there were concerns that there were conflicting reports of what had happened on the scene from different agencies who were involved, and there was a lot of conversation about this, even in international media, that frankly, if you read some of it, tended to lean into pretty damaging and harmful stereotypes about trans community members. And my view is this, that I think, one, it is important to separate out what each of our first responder agencies are there to do and what was officially documented versus what started spinning off into rumors and more in the coverage. Each of our agencies have a role to play, and they each arrived at different times. EMS and fire were on the scene first. They documented what they saw. They worked hard to try to resuscitate someone who was unconscious, and unfortunately were not able to. When that designation was made that resuscitation was not possible, Boston police were called to the scene to begin the death investigation, and they're continuing to coordinate with the medical examiner and others. And BPD's job, the police's job, is also then to assess the safety of everyone on site, including children, including others. They had an account that was read to be slightly different, although it was pretty close if you look at the reports to what was filed by the fire department. What it has, I think, upset me most of all is that in this conversation about was there illegal behavior, should children have been there, was this or that happening, misgendering of our residents, what has gotten lost is that there was a horrible tragedy that happened. A family is grieving now, and the people in that space, regardless of what might have been happening in and around or before, they needed to call 911 to try to get help. They did, and any of our residents in any situation, no matter how clean or messy your house is at that moment, no matter what was happening before, if someone needs help, call 911. That is what we are here for. And we are supposed to handle those situations with the utmost discretion, sensitivity, and training that is trauma-informed for reacting when residents are in the most horrific situations in their lives. And so there's been so much focus on the young people. Some sources even revealed their names and all sorts of speculation. The reason why it's important for us to document things officially, protect that information, and have that discretion is so that people's lives aren't upended when they happen to be already in crisis. And so that, I think, is most of all. There were rumors about whether there was hoarding and this and that. I saw the pictures. It was nowhere near what was being described. And a lot of that was not what the report said. It was just additional voices weighing in that, frankly, didn't need to. And I hope all of us have learned a lesson about letting our agencies do their jobs, document the facts. Of course, we need transparency and to know that they're being held accountable, but it's really important to have sensitivity for our residents' lives and to have privacy and not to just be putting everything out there when you're calling 911.
That was the voice of Boston Mayor Michelle Wu. She's going to stick with us to the top of the hour, taking our questions and yours. You're listening to 89.7 GBH, Boston Public Radio. The number's 877-301-8970. We are at the Boston Public Library.
This is what collaborative journalism looks like.
We are listening to you. We want to know from you what stories are important to you that we should be telling. My joke with people is they say, well, what do you want to know about? I said, I want to know about everything so I can decide which things I can pay attention to, because the things I never hear about are the things I know I can't write.
Trusted local news with NPR, GBH 89.7.
Absolutely happy to hear from anybody.
What matters to you.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Newbury Court, a full-service residential community in Concord, Massachusetts for persons 62 or over, committed to creating an active, independent lifestyle. More at newburycourt.org or 978-369-5155. And South Coast Artists, presenting their 20th annual Open Studio Tour July 15th and 16th in Tiverton and Little Compton, Rhode Island, and Dartmouth and Westport, Massachusetts. You can download the tour brochure at southcoastartists.org. And Gloucester Stage, presenting Stew by Zora Howard, Pulitzer Prize finalist for drama. 3 generations of Black women bond as they gather to cook and honor an anniversary together, now through July 23rd. GloucesterStage.com. And Boston Children's Hospital, ranked among the best children's hospitals in the nation by U.S. News & World Report. Boston Children's, where the world comes for answers. bostonchildrens.org/answers.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're joined by the mayor for an hour of Ask the Mayor. We've got a little less than a half hour to go. If you want to contact her, and by the way, we're streaming online at facebook.com/GBH News, youtube.com/GBH News. If you're not at the library and want to contact her, the way to do it by phone or text is 877-301-8970.
You know, I know you can't go into details. This is one of those embargoed stories. But nonetheless, $6.9 million in cultural investment grants. What can you tell us about this?
So we're making an announcement later today to highlight several incredible organizations who are receiving significant support through the federal recovery funds and other programming with the city. The idea is that we need to make a big investment in arts and culture as critical infrastructure. Sometimes you think about art and you think about something that's hanging in a museum, and that is so important that Boston has world-renowned cultural institutions that bring jobs, bring activity, and contribute to that global conversation. But many of these organizations are also using art as a vehicle for housing stability or creating jobs or de-escalating conflict in community. And so we're looking to highlight and provide that stability for the organizations so that we can see more art throughout our neighborhoods and see that connected to the daily lives of our residents.
So on the evening news tonight, we'll know who got what.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, in a little bit. I think I'm going there next.
1:30,
after
I think. Yeah. Kendall and Roslindale, you're next with the mayor of the city of Boston. Hey, Kendall.
I'm not Kendall, I'm Kendra.
Kendra.
Sorry.
Let's blame that on somebody
Yeah.
else. Hi, Kendra. It's really nice to have you. I'm kidding. Kendra, nice to have you. What's up?
Thanks for. I live in Roslindale, and getting to Forest Hills down Washington Avenue or along the J-Way in front of Faulkner Hospital is a nightmare because the rotary by the Arnold Arboretum has been reduced to 1 lane and because of bike lanes. And the bike lane there, I've never seen a bike on it. And it seems like some of the busiest streets are reducing lanes for bike lanes where it's really dangerous. Why not put the bike lanes in secondary streets or through the neighborhoods?
And Kendra, can you just tell me what time of day are you generally talking about, or is it kind of constant?
It's pretty much all the time, but I can't get from Roslindale to Jamaica Plain in less than 15 minutes because of that roundabout.
Okay, all right. I will, well, first of all, thank you for calling in. As you know, this area is one that I know very familiar with myself. We probably go down Washington Street, I don't know, a couple times a day even. I don't go as much down the other way around the Arboretum Rotary, but I will make sure that we check out the traffic flows just to be sure. I will say, though, that sometimes what can seem like a new bike lane associated with traffic is actually just cars coming back as people are getting back to where they were before. I'll just remind everyone that pre-pandemic, Boston was ranked the worst for rush hour traffic of any city across the country. Not even LA was worse than us. And we are seeing that come back. The only way to fix that in a city where we don't have extra land lying around everywhere to be able to build new roads, which wouldn't even work anyway, is to provide more options for people to move other ways, move more people down the same space that we have on our streets, fix the T, make sure that other ways of getting around are safe. And many of the bike lanes that, I'll have to look at this one in particular, but many of them in fact, were not car lanes anyway. They had been parking before. And so most of the time when we're making decisions like this, it is really about keeping traffic moving. And it's not a direct trade-off between a bike lane slowing down traffic, and usually it's something else like parking or some other snag or needing to time the traffic lights better together. So we can look to see if there's a way to deep dive in this area and think about it. But just in general, you will see more bike lanes around the city. We have to find ways for people to get around because it's already not working in a lot of places. And so the more that we can create other options, the more that we can even just give a small percentage of people another way to get around, the less traffic there will be for everyone.
Kendra, why don't you stay on hold and we'll get your contact information so the mayor's office can be in touch.
Number
Thanks
one,
for the call.
I've seen a lot of bike people there because they're riding to the Arboretum. They're riding their bikes to the Arboretum. But number two, I think we have to face facts here. There's a terrible hostility between drivers and bicycles, all over the city. And the classic case in point is West Roxbury's Center Street. We have several people texting about that on either sides of the issue. Very unsafe street, a lot of accidents there. And but there's an uproar there, despite all these accidents and the trouble there with trying to reconfigure Center Street in West Roxbury. But you're going to go ahead and do that, I think.
Yeah, we have here, as we see in a lot of different issues and places around the city, everyone agrees that something has to be done and that there is a problem. But where we aren't necessarily all on the same page yet is whether this change or that one will actually solve it, and if this change or that one would then create unintended consequences. So I don't know if folks are familiar, but Center Street in West Roxbury is 2 lanes in either direction. It's a very cozy neighborhood business district, so many amazing restaurants and an art studio, lawyer's office, lots of stuff to do on either end. But crossing the street, I've been saying, because we're in the area a lot, and it's one of those situations where if you're there with your kids, that is a place where I will not hold their hands, because when you're so afraid that they might pull their hand away, that you insist on holding their wrists so you can keep tight all the time, that is crossing that street. There are cars everywhere, and because it's 2 lanes in either direction, even if the lane of traffic closest to you when you first step into the crosswalk sees you and stops, then the second vehicle next to them won't necessarily see you. And that's where we've seen crash after crash, multiple fatalities on that stretch, injuries just about all down that corridor. And so we're proposing a change that would make it 3 lanes, basically a lane of traffic on either side, a center turning lane, to make it safer so that we don't have that kind of conflict anymore. It would also have a bike lane as well with the extra space that is created. This is about safety for pedestrians of all generations, to stop the horrific injuries that people have been experiencing there, from a senior who was struck and killed on the street several years ago at this point, to a kindergartner whose foot was run over crossing the street a few months ago. This is, we have to do something, and we have gotten a lot of feedback that we're still incorporating from residents into how to manage the curbside space and make it work for all the businesses, but this is a change that needs to happen.
One last transportation thing for you. Everybody knows they're installing bike lanes in the Sumner Tunnel now as we speak. Today, nobody works on Monday anymore. That was a joke for those who are upset about that. Tuesday's like the first real work day of the week these days. How did this morning go on the Sumner front, do you know?
I did not get a report back on specific numbers, but that's probably a good thing.
Okay, let's go to Michael and staying in JP. You're on Boston Public Radio with the mayor. Hi, Michael.
Hi, Jim. Hi, Mayor. This is Michael and JP.
Hello, Michael.
Keep up the great work. My question
a housing question, I'm guessing.
You guessed right. You guessed right. What we're hearing at the State House is that the leadership of both the House and Senate have set the word out that there will be no legislation to regulate rents or lift the ban at the state level, including the home rule petition. There is an opportunity to do a initiative petition and referendum in 2024, but it would clearly take a broad coalition and a lot of resources. Would you consider leading and helping to convene a coalition to do an initiative petition There's a deadline coming up pretty fast for text, so it would take some fast moves. But would you be willing to take the lead on that so that we could join you in that?
Thank you, Michael, for all that you do and for raising this issue. You know, when I'm asked what are the top 3 issues stressing residents across the city, I say housing, housing, housing. It really is what is displacing kids out of our school system, affecting our recovery from the pandemic in terms of our economy. And many folks have been on the ground advocating for a very long time for the protections that we need. I have not gotten word specifically from the legislature, but have been in several conversations where the idea of a ballot initiative has shaped statewide policy. Basically, every election cycle, the last couple, something major has come out of it, whether it's driver's licenses for all or protections for fair wages and all of that. I wanted to be really clear about what Boston would need, so I think it really depends on what the language of the ballot initiative would say. If it is about generically letting cities do their thing, that's great, and Boston has been very specific about what we would do and how that would work in our city. If it becomes more detailed and prescriptive in a way that I worry it might not fit every city situation, that would be a little bit different. So I think the language matters a lot, but we are all affected by this, so happy to engage in more conversations.
Michael, thank you very much for the call. We appreciate it. You know, we've asked you every month about what the situation is with the charge of, I believe it's unnecessary excessive force against this guy who's got a lot of such charges in his years in the force, this Danilecki guy. And I assume, since we haven't heard, there's still no...
I don't have a specific update
Okay.
on him, but I will remind myself.
But we asked the Attorney General when she was here, I think a couple of weeks ago, whether or not this post commission, a statewide thing, if she felt it was appropriate for it to get involved in individual local misconduct cases. Here's what Andrea Campbell had to say.
So the Post Commission, we view, and we stay in contact with them, and we're pushing them and working in collaboration, is to take on those individual officer cases, to look at, does the misconduct rise to a level where someone should be decertified to never work in law enforcement ever again?
Can they do that even before there's a finding by the local?
That's the part they figure out, but we're pushing them to be more involved because they're up here at the state level, I think, where there's less conflict of interest, maybe other reasons why they should play that role.
Does that trouble you? I mean, the whole notion of the state having some level of involvement in individual misconduct determinations on the local level?
No, I think the Post Commission has been a really important reform and frankly has been a needed backstop. So far we have not necessarily seen them leaping ahead of cities, but you can imagine a situation where there has been documented either misconduct or some other factors, and then each municipality still has to go through a very extensive arbitration-related process, whereas the state can just say, we've seen enough, there it is.
Fair enough. Let's go to Ann in the South End. Welcome to the show. You're on with the mayor. Hey.
Hi, Mayor Wu. My question is, at some point, are you going to address the lack of body-worn cameras in the shooting of Justin Root? Not one officer has been disciplined who failed to activate their body-worn cameras per BPD policy. And do you have anything in place to ensure this doesn't happen again during the next shooting? It feels there's no accountability for officers who violated BPD's own policies.
Ann, thank you.
Thank you. I just continue to grieve with the Root family and others. I know this has been a many years long journey, and while I need to get back to you to understand what is the latest in this case, I can say that the use of body-worn cameras and the availability, the access to the footage is now, I think, pretty firmly on track. We have a surveillance ordinance in the city of Boston that documents privacy issues and data retention and the many factors that relate to surveillance technology. And in fact, in Boston, there has been a practice where whenever there is the horrible situation of an officer-involved shooting, that footage, as soon as it is cleared and the investigation is far enough along that it won't jeopardize anything legally, that footage is usually publicly shared with in a group that includes local advocates and community members, just so there is that full transparency.
Anne, thank you for the call. We wish you luck. Thank you.
I believe was the person that was suffering from mental illness and was outside one of the hospitals and was ultimately, I think, shot in Brookline. Yeah, okay, I just want to be clear that was that case. You know, Mayor, you jumped into the pool the other day in East Boston. And
literally, you're talking about.
Literally,
yes,
you did. Yep,
clear,
everybody got the pictures on the news. But you made a point, I think, that maybe a lot of people are aware of. There's like a racial disparity in who knows how to swim and who doesn't. So tell us about that.
Yeah, we're a city that is right on the water, and the opportunities to think about being a New Englander and go to the beach and enjoy this and that part of being in this region. Far too many of our residents don't enjoy that because the water is scary and dangerous. If you don't know how to swim, the odds, even in the news, we see time and again the preventable drownings of so many with access to swim lessons, training, equipment, life jackets, etc. So we've been making a real push in the city of Boston. It's led by our Chief of Human Services, Jose Masso, who himself first got his start as a lifeguard in one of our BCYF centers that he now oversees. And you see the racial disparities. Black and brown children are far less likely to know how to swim, often connected to the disparities in their parents' generation.
Right.
If you're a child of parents who don't know how to swim, you are far, far, far less likely to know how to swim because there's already that understandable and, in fact, rightly so, fear of being near the water. And so we want to make this a multi-generational push to create access and safety for all, to save lives. Drowning is the #1 source of cause for fatalities in young children. And this is something that, as a region where we want people to be safe and healthy and active and have opportunities to cool down in increasingly hot summers, having a strategy and intentionality around swimming is really important. So we have 500 free swim lesson slots across the city this year. We have free lifeguard trainings, programs for anybody who wants to get a job as a lifeguard. We are providing 100 free life jackets for families to be able to have, especially with access points around some of our coastal areas. And we're opening up more and more of our pools that had been closed because of facilities issues, which in East Boston, that's the one that I jumped in. We've new renovation completed, or because of staffing issues where we've been able to staff up.
Okay, so you play Mozart on the stage at Symphony
I
Hall.
can generally
you
stay
jump in a
afloat in
pool
water.
in East Boston. What's next?
What's next? I had to leave the event early, but I was on the basketball court just a little bit ago with the governor and lieutenant governor celebrating the kickoff of the state and city's partnership. The state has a program called Summer Nights with free youth programming in many sites across the Commonwealth, including more than 30 organizations in Boston. So they had their sneakers on. I was going to take them on in my wedges, but I had to come here.
Could you dunk over Healy? Have you ever thought about that?
I could not dunk
Okay,
over
fine.
the governor.
Let's go to Beverly in the Fenway. You're on with the mayor of the city of Boston, Michelle Wu. Hey, Beverly.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Hi. So thank you, Mayor Wu, for all you're doing. I've got some reverb, I'm sorry, on my phone. Anyway.
We can hear you.
I would like to suggest that some of these empty buildings also be used for artist spaces. Our city has several major art schools that are graduating artists who can no longer afford to work in our city and have to leave. And the same thing for artists such as myself who started organizations like Fort Point and SOA and can no longer afford to work there. So artists create communities. Why not, in addition to finding housing for people who need homes, which is absolutely essential, how about finding some artist work-only spaces in those empty buildings?
Great question, Beverly. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And the examples that you pointed to, Fort Point and SOA, I mean, these are in some ways the reason why some of these neighborhoods are thriving today is because artists built them and made them beautiful and vibrant and exciting. So in fact, part of our downtown revitalization plan is looking at how we can incorporate more arts everywhere. This is something that New York did as well. Whether it was, when they had a glut of lots of extra office space after bank mergers and situations a couple decades ago, they did convert some to housing, and then some of them were actually made available as low-cost or no-cost arts administration spaces, because sometimes an office building isn't going to be fit for being a performance space or a studio necessarily, but many of the arts organizations, if they can move in to their administrative offices, it just reduces the cost burden. They can put those dollars somewhere else. So I will say, as a big picture thing, we created a new planning advisory council that is meant to reshape how all of our decisions are made around the growth of our city, not just buildings evaluated one by one on their own by the BPDA or the ZBA, Boston Planning and Development Agency, or the Zoning Board of Appeals, but to get our agencies around the table that are all interconnected. So those groups, the BPDA is leading that, but also the Environment Department is there, the Disability Commission to plan for accessibility in new growth, small businesses, transportation, and very importantly, the Arts and Culture Cabinet is embedded in that council as well, because we believe that arts has to be part of how we grow. There's been more and more of a push to create dedicated artist buildings as part of mitigation and new developments as well. And so I know we're many, many years late in this effort, but our hope is to very firmly make sure that arts can stay and is part of the infrastructure here.
Beverly, thanks.
Yeah, we want to squeeze in one more call. We have a gentleman at the Boston Public Library microphone, Edwin, with a question for the mayor. Is Edwin still here?
He is.
He is.
Hello there, Edwin.
Thank you, Edwin.
What's up?
Hi, everyone. Can I get the question, please? Hi. So I'm part of, I'm working with the Jamaica Plain City Committee in Jamaica Plain Neighborhood Council. And we're worried about the MBTA reconstruction around the Forest Hills area. And we wanted to know, why is the city prioritizing SALT over housing by refusing to vacate the DPW yard in regard to all that?
You're talking about the Arborway yards?
Yeah.
Got it. Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for being involved. And hi, Sarah, as well. So this is a really, really, okay, so talk about planning and the need for us to be really intentional about all the various pieces that have to fit together when we have the opportunity to see something different and to see development in our community. The Arborway Yards is a very large parcel that is owned by the MBTA and is slated for the ability to have our bus system become electrified with charging and a new bus garage and all. That would take up some of the parcel. We definitely want a significant chunk of the parcel to be housing. It's housing that's affordable to our residents. And currently, the City of Boston has a small piece of that with our salt pile and other pieces of our public works that are needed to make sure we have fast times to be able to respond to different places. We are looking at it. I want to make sure that we can do our part and not just kind of stick in the way of grander plans that would satisfy many different needs. We have to figure out if we move something, where we would move it to, and so there's a lot of complications there, but I know we're working very closely and want to see some way where we can help support the larger vision.
Mayor, before you go, we started today's show with Marjorie talking incessantly about wanting to see a cage match between Elon Musk and
I want no part of that.
Mark Zuckerberg. But putting that aside,
He's mischaracterizing what I said.
no, I'm not. The
usual.
underlying discussion was about the creation of threads, and as we said, there are roughly 250 million users on Twitter. In a week, 100 million people signed up for Zuckerberg's Meta thing, Threads, which is a sort of variation on Twitter. You told us a couple of months ago you're going to reduce your use, your personal use, which you have. I just checked. Obviously, as a mayor, you're still tweeting. Are you on Threads? And what's your whole
I'm on Threads. Yeah, I posted a couple times so far on the first day. I think, I joined Mastodon when that became available, and then it seemed to taper off. The point of being on any social media platform is connecting with people, with others, and for me, particularly connecting with our Boston residents. Twitter had gotten to be so noisy and chaotic and frankly full of harassment from all sides there was just no room left for thoughtful conversation, or even to reach people in our community in a way that was much more unstructured. I think the beauty of Twitter before is you shouldn't have to come to City Hall to be able to participate in a meeting, or even come ask a question here. Send a message, and hopefully someone who knows about it can, I've had lots of amazing experiences on Twitter, taking a picture of a sea creature in Boston Harbor saying, "What is this?" And then a squid expert responded who had a PhD in something and gave the exact genus and species.
I believe it is, yes.
So Threads doesn't quite have that critical mass yet, but I think it's very promising because it's linked to Instagram, and there was just it's pretty easy to switch over. Not everyone has made it over there yet, so it's still much, much, much less engagement than on Twitter in its heyday, but I remain hopeful that we can find a way where people can, again, have that more democratic feeling, connection, and public forum.
So before you go, the flan is beyond belief. It's fabulous. One more time, where'd you get it? On Blue Hill
Carmelo's,
Ave?
Blue Hill Ave. Come out and enjoy them, and many, many other small businesses at Open Streets this Saturday.
Great.
Fantastic.
Mayor Wu, it's great to see you as always. Michelle
Thank
Wu,
you for having me.
thank
Mayor
you.
Wu, thank you very much for coming.